Our opening hymn this morning was written by Carolyn McDade. You also know her from her wonderful hymn, Spirit of Life. But there's another song by Carolyn McDade that I want to evoke this morning and begin with. It's called Trouble and Beauty, and I heard it first at a religious education conference somewhere along the way in my long and muddled career. She wrote it in 1984, and somehow it never got the attention that it should have. I wish it were in our hymnal, especially because that way I could have you sing it with me, but it's not in our hymnal. So I want to just read you the words of the verses of Carolyn McDade's song, Trouble and Beauty. By these laboring wings, we have come thus far to this place in the wind, where we see trouble and beauty. We see trouble, we see beauty, and that far wandering star still calls us on. By this breath conspired, we have come thus far to this place in our song, where we sing trouble and beauty. We sing trouble, we sing beauty, and that far wandering star still calls us on. By these hearts of rage, we have come thus far to this place in our love, where we dare trouble and beauty. We dare trouble, we dare beauty, and that far wandering star still calls us on. I find myself coming back to this song again and again. Trouble and beauty. We see trouble, we see beauty, and that far wandering star still calls us on. When I was ordained almost 26 years ago, the congregation said to me, "Among us and wherever you may be called to serve, we would have you preach the word of truth in freedom and in love." When I was installed at Bucksmont in 1993, I promised to speak the truth in love. These promises are common to our ordination and installation services. They make it clear that our congregations demand of our ministers that we seek the truth, and that we have the freedom to speak that truth as we understand it, even when it's hard to hear. But because truth is sometimes hard to hear, we are also called to speak it from a place of love. Now, this language about speaking the truth in love, I always assumed this was some wonderful old Unitarian thing. And when I went to look it up one time, I found that, of course, it goes back to St. Paul's letters, the letter to the Ephesians in specific. So the Unitarians didn't make it up. This is biblical stuff. And Paul was not just writing to the church leaders. He was writing to the church at Ephesus, to the entire body of believers. So while ministers perhaps are set apart in a very specific way to seek and speak the truth in love, we are not the only ones who are supposed to do this. Everyone is called to speak the truth in love. Now, we all know that hard truths are easier to hear when they come from a place of love, or at least from a place of compassion rather than judgment. Probably we could all tell stories about times when someone spoke the truth to us, maybe a hard truth that they thought we needed to hear. And if we're lucky, at least some of the time they were speaking that truth from a place of love. I will give you one example. When I was in seminary, I was on the leadership team for our Unitarian Universalist student group. And at one of our meetings, there were about 6 of us around a table in the cafeteria, and the discussion got very lively. I was passionate about whatever the topic was, long since forgotten now. And I participated in this discussion with enormous energy. And after the meeting, another woman in the group, who had been very quiet throughout the discussion, took me aside. It was clear that she was very uncomfortable about what she was going to say, that she was starting a conversation she really didn't want to have, but it was also clear that she felt that whatever it was she was about to say, she really needed to say it. And she gently explained to me that some people require time to think and consider their response before they jump in to comment on an issue. This had honestly never occurred to me. And she said, when people like me, who tend to think quickly on our feet and know what we want to say all the time right away, just keep on talking and never leave pauses in the conversation, people like her never say anything. She wanted me to understand this because she knew I was headed into ministry. And she knew that if I did not learn to rein myself in and leave space for others to have a voice, I would not do good ministry. She said all this to me gently, even reluctantly, but clearly and firmly. She did not intend to shame me, although of course I felt ashamed. When I tried to apologize to her for the dynamics of that particular meeting, she said, no, this isn't that I'm feeling bad personally about what just happened. She was much more concerned with my understanding the dynamic so that I could learn to draw the best out of the people I would be working with going forward. She told me the truth, and she spoke it from a place of love. She believed in my potential for ministry, and she wanted me to do it better. You could say that she saw the trouble in my behavior, but she also saw the beauty. I needed her to name that trouble, and I've been grateful to her ever since, because while I have not completely learned that lesson, I do think my awareness of the tendency to dominate conversations has helped me to rein in some of its more destructive manifestations. But I don't think I could have heard and responded to her constructively if she had not also affirmed the beauty of my ministry, because that's what gave me the hope that I could indeed do better, that I had something worth building on. As we look around at our world right now, there's an awful lot of truth-telling going on. Or at least there are an awful lot of people claiming to be telling the truth. It can be extremely hard to figure out who to believe. And very few of the folks claiming to speak the truth right now seem to be doing it with much love. At least I'm not feeling the love. I don't know about you. We certainly know that our world is filled with trouble. Many of us feel bludgeoned every time we watch the news. And that can be true for folks anywhere on the political spectrum these days. Whether we tune into Fox or PBS, we're surrounded by divisiveness and bitterness and anger. Toxic exchanges choke Twitter accounts and Facebook feeds. But I don't think you need me to tell you that. If you read the paper, if you ever turn on the radio, if you listen to the news, if you spend any time on social media at all, you're already bombarded. And yes, we need to pay attention. We need to sign petitions and join marches and write letters and engage in difficult conversations. We need to keep seeking the truth and then speaking up with all the love and compassion that we can find within ourselves. And our intense awareness of all the things that are wrong with the world can leave us with this overwhelming sense of urgency to be keeping up with them, following them, confronting them, focusing all of our energy on all of those problems, to the point that we see nothing but the trouble. When trouble seems to be overwhelming the world, taking the time out to stop and look for the beauty may seem self-indulgent or frivolous, even irresponsible. But somehow we have to keep really clear in our minds that the trouble is not the only truth out there. There's a wonderful quotation from E.B. White, who of course I love for his children's books, but also for his dry wit and his gems of wisdom in many of his essays and other adult writings. And he wrote, "If the world were merely seductive, that would be easy. If it were merely challenging, that would be no problem. But I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve the world and a desire to enjoy the world. This makes it hard to plan the day." To improve the world or to enjoy the world? I've also heard people adapt this a little bit and use the language of saving the world or savoring the world. And yeah, it can make it hard to plan the day until we realize that the two things go together. It's because we enjoy and love and savor our beautiful, blessed world that we want to improve or save it. It's that very beauty that inspires us to confront the trouble, that allows us to keep love and compassion at the heart of our truth-telling. We are called both to savor and to save. So we need to be deepening our appreciation and our awareness of all that is good and beautiful in the world. As Matthew Fox points out in his book Original Blessing, if we savored more, we would be more in touch with our moral outrage, because our love of life would increase so dramatically that we would become less and less tolerant of death forces. So the very act of savoring the world, paradoxically, then gives us the strength, the energy, the commitment to try to save it. So sometimes, in order to be able to look at the truth and the trouble from a perspective of hopelessness, we need to take breaks from the truth. Or at least we need to take breaks from part of the truth, from that constant barrage of vitriol and anger, and to be very intentional about looking for some of the other kinds of truth that can be harder to see. My husband forwarded me this wonderful opinion piece from the Washington Post by Michael Gerson, who is a regular columnist of theirs. He writes I went and looked for more stuff by him after reading this one that I found so incredibly beautiful and powerful. And he writes tremendously insightful and often scathing political commentary. He obviously follows the political scene with intense and constant scrutiny. He's got to be just plugged in all the time because he's responding lightning fast to everything that's happening. But then he describes, in this particular piece, a time when he had to take an extended break from all digital communication. He was in a medical setting that didn't allow cell phones or laptops. He doesn't say why. Our theory is maybe he'd had a really severe concussion. He describes how very unsettling it was to be suddenly cut off, experiencing a kind of stillness that has become very rare for most of us. I had been afraid I'd go stir crazy, he writes, and then adds, which I promptly did. He struggled at first with the quiet, because in the quiet he found that the first thing that happened was that he was confronted with his own loneliness, his own tendency to be self-critical, all of his own internal stuff, without any distractions to take his mind somewhere else. But eventually he realized that, quote, the uninterrupted quiet allows us to stand above ourselves and gain a more objective frame. And then he goes on to say, among the first nugget of eternal wisdom you discover is that a day without Twitter is like a day without anthrax. Taking a rest from rage, he says, is highly therapeutic. Gerson acknowledges that the silence is frightening, that he can't hide in the distraction of his busyness or numb himself with electronic entertainment. He's not optimistic about the state of the world right now. And the silence offered him the space to feel the depth of his fear and his dismay. But because he was not plugged in and constantly feeding the anger and the rage that went along with that, the silence also made room for him to feel other things. He writes, so how do I respond to well-reasoned pessimism? That in a certain light, the dust in my room looks like snow, and the actual snow outside my window looks like the preparation for some vast, extravagant cosmic wedding. That the cranky lady down the hospital hall, I asked for peaches, not pears, is really a miracle of chemistry, engineering, and poetry that humans are not even close to understanding. Now notice, he doesn't say he has become optimistic. He's still not optimistic. But he's able to see the wonder, the beauty that is present even in the midst of trouble that is so real. He's not optimistic, but he does have hope. We often use those words hope and optimism as if they are interchangeable. I understand them to be two very, very different things. In his essay, The Politics of Hope, Václav Havel describes hope as an orientation of the heart. And he writes, "Hope is not the same as joy that things are going well, or willingness to invest in enterprises obviously headed for early success, but rather an ability to work for something because it is good, not just because it stands a chance to succeed. Hope is definitely not the same as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the conviction that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out." Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well. That's optimism, the belief that something's going to be okay. Hope is the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. There are many times when we're having to face the truth that we simply are not able to be optimistic. We may not have any real confidence that things are going to turn out well, but we can still hold on to what makes sense. We can still see the beauty in the world, the power of goodness and truth that give us the strength and the courage to keep on working for those things that make sense. That's the hope. In Carolyn McDade's song, that's the far wandering star that calls us on. And I want to just insert something here for a moment, and I'm so grateful that we have someone from NAMI here because I've been such an admirer of the work of that organization. We all have times that we're not optimistic. That can be absolutely appropriate in certain circumstances when we really don't think there's much chance that things are going to turn out well. And that can leave us sad and discouraged and tired and feeling burned out. Even then, though, we can still be looking for those glimpses of beauty that give us that sense of hope. It's okay that we can't always be optimistic, but when we can't even find a glimmer of hopefulness or a flash of beauty anywhere, then it may be time to ask for some help. It may be time to get screened for depression or some other disorder that could be helped by therapy or medication because something else might be going on there. So this differentiation between optimism and hope has become so important to me. And optimism is a little more superficial, it's much more results-driven. Hope is something much deeper down. It's what keeps us going when we're not optimistic. And going back to that op-ed piece about a day without Twitter, Gerson goes on to quote Marilyn Robinson's beautiful novel, Gilead, where the elderly minister, as he's nearing the end of his life, reflects, "Wherever you turn your eyes, the world can shine like transfiguration. You don't have to bring a thing to it except a little willingness to see. Only who could have the courage to see it?" Gerson calls this courage to see the settled choice to see the goodness and joy at the heart of things. He manages, even in the discouraging environment of his hospital stay, to see the possibility of transfiguration in something as simple as the dust in his room, or the snow outside his window, or the miracle of the cranky woman down the hall. I received that gift of transfiguration one morning when everything was going wrong. I was headed to a meeting, I was running late, I was angry with myself because I was running late. I had not had time for breakfast, so when I stopped for gas, I thought, well, I'll just run in really quick and buy a bagel and a cup of coffee. So I grabbed what I wanted and I rushed over to the counter, and the man behind the cash register who had a lovely accent that I could not quite identify, was very slow and deliberate as he rang up my purchases. "Would you like a bag?" he asked me. "No," I said, just wanting to get out of there. "Do you need some napkins?" he asked me. "No," I snapped, wishing he would just shut up and give me my change. "I have everything I need." And he stopped and looked at me with delight and said, "Oh, you are a lucky woman." That man spoke the truth to me in love. He could not possibly have missed my agitation and irritation. I don't tend to be subtle. But he had the compassion to take a risk and point out that it wasn't the whole story. I had been so caught up in my troubles that morning that I would not have bothered to look for any beauty anywhere. But he just held up a little mirror and showed me the blessedness of my own life. Where do you find beauty? What gives you hope? It might be as simple as coming to church and having a moment where you get to share a joy or a sorrow with someone else who listens to you and cares about what you say. It might be a chance interaction with a stranger who offers you an unexpected kindness. It might be a moment like the one I had on a walk yesterday when I was trudging through the snow in a hurry to get to the grocery store, knowing the sermon was not yet quite finished, when I heard an unfamiliar bird song, and I looked up to see some kind of woodpecker up in the tree above me, pecking away and singing his little heart out. There's always beauty to be found. It doesn't make the trouble any less real, but it gives us the hope to keep going. So if we're committed to speaking the truth in love, we just need to make sure we speak the whole truth. Yes, we need to speak out and act when we see falsehood and injustice. We need to look unflinchingly at the trouble, but we also need to speak the truth of the beauty, to appreciate all that is good in ourselves, in the people we meet, even those very different from ourselves, and in the world around us. To speak the truth, not only with love, but with hope. May it be so.